Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending, of course, on which part of the world you're tuning in from. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the hashtag Break the Bias Women in Africa Cultural Expectations and Gender Inequality event brought to you by Youth Transforming Africa as well as the World Bank in Africa region. My name is Dimpolo Kheo, and I'm so excited to be moderating today's session. I'm excited to be in the company of such incredible African women who are completely breaking the mold in their respective industries and who are also going to help us understand exactly what it takes to change the narrative about the role of African women in today's world. We would like this session to be as engaging as possible. So please do contribute on the social media as well as in the chat using the chat box function. We'd like to hear all of your questions and comments throughout the session. Now, the sequencing for today's events will be quite straightforward. We're first going to hear a formal introduction from Ms. Ruti Njangu. Then we'll be introducing our panelists for today. After that, we'll be able to jump into our discussion before we wrap up with a Q&A session. For the audience, please remember to have your microphone as well as your camera off at all times so we can have a seamless session. For our panelists, please make sure that you keep your answers as short as possible. I'm actually going to allocate everyone just over 1 minute. So 1 to 2 minutes for your contributions so that we allow everyone to have a meaningful contribution during today's engagement. Before we launch into today's discussion, I'm going to invite Ms. Ruti Ejangu. She's the Youth Engagement Lead for Western and Central Africa at the World Bank, and she's going to give us some background as well as the official opening and welcome. Ruti, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, Dimfo. I'm so pleased to be here for this rich conversation that we're about to have. A very warm welcome again to our guests that have taken the time to join us here today. This year's International Women's Day theme is Break the Bias, which highlights the importance of challenging biases and misconceptions in the interest of creating a more inclusive and gender equal world. Thus, Dimfo, I echo your sentiment about being in the midst of amazing African women from different backgrounds and stages breaking biases in their respective fields. It is undisputable that Africa's development cannot take place without gender equality. The COVID-19 pandemic clearly exacerbated existing gender inequalities across sub-Saharan Africa, whether it be school closures, confinement measures that decreased school enrollment for girls, led to high exits from the labor market, and increased the risk of gender-based violence. This is why the World Bank is even more committed to strengthening and safeguarding the human capital of women and girls in sub-Saharan Africa through health, education, social protection, water, and sanitation interventions. These all protect women and lead to increased opportunities for girls in the region. Today, we will touch on the wage gap, education access, and economic inclusion for women and girls, which are all priority areas for the bank's work in Africa. Our hope is that we create a space for an authentic conversation and that you leave here with a better understanding of how we can address these challenges by eliminating cultural biases that limit the potential of women. With that being said, please feel free to let us know in the chat how you are breaking the bias in your community or field. Thank you again, Dimfo, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that, Ruti. Before we waste any more time, I am going to introduce our speakers, our incredible panel of women who are going to be sharing their nuggets of wisdom and really helping us to have this conversation in a rich and meaningful way. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce Ms. O'Neill Masamba. She is the World Bank Group Youth Summit Manager for 2022. Ms. Santha Mbacham. She is a journalist, a PR guru, as well as the founder of the Imagination Agency. We're also joined by Ms. Kati Dao Diallo. She's a fashion entrepreneur, as well as the founder of the fashion line Niaku. We're also joined by Ms. Rosine Gualin. She is the director of the Ministry of ICT in Burundi. And last but certainly not least, we're joined by Ms. Estelle Kosube. She's an economist in the World Bank Africa's Gender Innovation Lab. It's so awesome to be with you, ladies. In fact, this doesn't feel like a formal engagement. It really feels like I'm hanging out with an awesome group of women, an awesome group of mentors who are really just going to open up and share some really important aspects of their journeys. But perhaps we should start here. This year's theme for International Women's Day was hashtag breaking the bias, right? And according to the World Bank's Business and Law Report that was published just a month ago, 178 countries maintain legal barriers that prevent women's full economic participation. In sub-Saharan Africa, we have numerous reforms in this area, but the challenges remain. Now, I would like to know from you, O'Neill, as a lawyer, a development practitioner, a youth leader, what are your thoughts on how African women can overcome these legal barriers while maximizing their potential?
Merci Dimfo et merci à la Banque mondiale et Youth Transforming Africa.
Thank you very much for uh, inviting me. I am a lawyer, and the reforms are absolutely necessary. So it is necessary to bring the governments to bring reforms and to change the practices. And that's why women have a very important role. They have to work with the government to change things. And there is a report in the Congo Republic on the business and women to show progress on equality with women, and gives credit to a group of women to pressuring the government to having reforms with international actors. So I think that young women have the power to have things change and to be heard. There are many means to do so, and I think that there are many media to be heard regionally, internationally, and it might take time. Laws will be implemented and maybe their effects will be in a longer term, but young African women have to mobilize in their communities to change things. And the report is that in sub-Saharan Africa, there are disparities, but there are many things that we can do locally to change these issues. For instance, the tontine system for funding, and there are plans for young women in Malawi. There was an initiative to educate women, to get them to have funding to change things. My advice in order to go over these obstacles is to be an actor in change. Thank you.
That's so important. Thank you so much for that contribution, O'Neill. I think what I really like from what you had to say is highlighting the fact that making a change or being an active citizen doesn't just look like one thing. Women need to mobilize at a community level, but also at a policy level. So there's different ways of making changes in our respective industries. But shifting to the role of women in the media, which is very important. Santha, my next question is directed to you. As the founder of a very successful PR agency in Cameroon, and with your rich experience in journalism, how exactly can we work towards using the media as a tool to drive inclusive storytelling, as well as messaging that really pushes for income equality that can tangibly reduce the gender pay gap?
Thank you, Dimfo, for that wonderful question. It's quite interesting and very worthy of note to be able to come with terms that in which we want to change and break the bias, we have to take up space and be loud. Let me explain. Malcolm X once said, the media is the most powerful entity that we have on earth. It has the power to make the innocent look guilty and the guilty look innocent, and that's power because it changed the minds of the masses. Speaking of that power, why do I say take up space and be loud? It's just because we need to be able to have adequate representation, because the media that we have right now in Cameroon, and from my own experience, they are louder about, things concerning, sensationalism, tabloid journalism, and community, and everything that has to do with people's personal lives. But they are not loud enough about things that matter, things in terms of, impact created, things in terms of what women are doing on a daily basis, those roles that are assigned to men, that are normally assigned to men that women can also do. They're not being loud about that. They're not being loud about the representation that we need and that is present in our societies in terms of what women are doing and what they're doing daily to be able to overcome this bias that has been long, has been in the minds of the people for the longest time. We need adequate representation. There's not enough representation. And I think that most of all, the women who are successful are sort of shy about their successes. And so they are sort of hidden. And in my own experience, it's key for us as a PR agency to be able to bring them to the limelight and tell their stories in a way that makes people understand the importance. I'll tell you for facts that in Cameroon, we are more concerned about people's daily lives, about things that happen in communities, in terms of what they say, Kongosa or gossip. However, in our society, we hardly see news that elevates, that educates, that empowers, that promotes, that puts women in positive limelight. And however, with the advent of social media, I think that it's time, and that's what we are doing with our agency, to put women on the front and also to just encourage women to put themselves out there more. You own the mic, so you have to tell your story, tell your narrative. Don't let anybody tell it for you. And if you want change, then you have to take the mic and tell your own stories. And we're helping people daily tell their own stories through our PR, branding, and communications activities. Thank you.
Sure, that's so important. I really love the notion of encouraging women to take up space, but after women have taken space, making sure that we document that, right? Because it's not as if women on the continent are not breaking the mold. Women are doing incredibly well, especially in the areas that are critical for the the African economy. In agriculture and technology, women are present, but we need to tell those stories so that we keep encouraging women to take up space and doing that incredible work. So thank you so much for that contribution, Santa. Now, we constantly hear about African women taking up space, right? Or being entrepreneurial, being among the most entrepreneurial women in the world, in fact. However, according to the International Labour Organization, in sub-Saharan Africa, there's a huge income gap, especially for female entrepreneurs, on average, only earning 2/3 compared to their male counterparts. Now, Kadita, you are a successful fashion entrepreneur, and your business has allowed you to break into several spaces that did not, historically include African women, such as the Paris Fashion Week. Can you please tell us a bit about your experience in getting funding for your fashion venture and how we can better create ecosystems that really support female entrepreneurship? Before you answer, I just want to say that it's very clear that you are the fashion entrepreneur among us. It's very clear to see you look amazing, but yes, how can we create better and more supportive ecosystems for women-owned businesses on the continent?
Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Déjà, merci pour le compliment.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the compliment. It's very kind. It is a pleasure to be a panelist today. It's an interesting question because entrepreneurship is something that has been in existence for the longest of times. Women have always been fighters. And for me, it's through my grandmother's story in the 40s. She was already fighting to work for her home and for herself. That was my greatest inspiration. Because be a fashion creator is not something easy in the world we live in, particularly when you're a woman, because we don't have the financial support we need, or sometimes the family does not even want to support you. As far as I'm concerned, I'm lucky to have my family support. I did force their hand a bit. It's hard to make people understand you want to work in fashion and go further and reach the international sphere. It's not easy to go to France and go to the Paris Fashion Week where you won't even be recognized as an African. It's not the idea that they have of you, an African woman coming to do fashion in Paris. So we see we have to tell women in the world and in Africa that we have the power and the motivation to do this and to reach a certain level. I've worked really hard. I've had a lot of hardships, but it is thanks to my loved ones and my family that I was able to reach various milestones in today's society, since I live in the Islamic Republic of Mauritania. Also, education has a big role to play. If women cannot go beyond their home, because we have to abide by certain rules there, and we have to, when we should be free to make our own choices and think freely. So these are the rules that I've always believed in. And I have been personally very lucky with the family that I have, but I would love to have all of these young women who have not had the same luck and have not been able to go beyond these limits. And so here in Mauritania, I'm trying to help girls to go beyond the high school degree and go to university and have an opportunity to have a chance to break in this field. They have the possibility to succeed if they can get this education, and that's what they're lacking. So training and education are of the utmost importance. I believe that I'm lucky. I've had a family who supported me, and many do not have this. So I'd like to insist on that. It's hard, but there's something to do at this level. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Kadita. You know, I really love your response because you spoke so much about sisterhood. I think you actually spent more of your answer telling us about the work that you've done to make sure that other young women are able to break into the industry, that they're able to access things like education in high school as well as in higher learning. I mean, I think that's so important, right? This theme of sisterhood and lifting others as we rise. So thank you so much for that contribution. But earlier on, we spoke about the importance of using the media to change perceptions about African women. And I would like to hear now from Ms. Rosine Katoni, who's the General Director at the Ministry of ICT in Burundi, about how we can use the media and storytelling to get more young women.
C'est une bonne question. En dans le domaine technologique, comment
It's a good question. In the technological sector, we should involve women more in the technological world through the technological tools and media. I'd like to start with statistics. These are the World Bank statistics. Women are the largest part of the population. In Africa also. But Africa, our beautiful continent, is the youngest continent. So as a woman, as a young woman, women must understand that to involve themselves in the technological world is not an option, it's an obligation, because it is a cross-cutting sector and covers trade, agriculture, health, tourism, fashion, entrepreneurship. We are in a digital century. The world economy revolves around the digital. So this largest part of the African population is full of strength, is very lively, and must be called upon and feel that they are consumers of technological producers, or they are actors of their production. Whether it is one or the other, they do not have a choice. They must be part of the technological world. There must be no exception nor marginalization. So the government, in order to integrate African women in this technological world, must understand and make sure that women are not marginalized in the education arena and in the science sector and the STEM sectors. Otherwise, they will be left behind, and there will be a large force of labor left behind that won't be able to take part in the development in Africa. Today, we are in a digital century and a modern world. We can speak of women empowerment only if we integrate them into the modern world and have them have access to these technological tools. So they are both producers and consumers, these women, and the governments must create a favorable environment so that it is conducive to their integration so that they can be both consumers and producers.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gatouni. And earlier we spoke, I'm going to take a note of the fact that you said that we cannot speak of the empowerment of women without the full integration of women into our society. And that's such a great point that you've made. Moving on to our next question. Earlier, we spoke on the role of media in advancing women in the STEM field. And I just want to follow up with the question. I just want to follow up with a question from Ms. Gatouni. What do you think is the role of women? What do you think is the role of men? How do we ensure that, women are able to assert themselves in a field that is still heavily dominated by men? What do you think about that? Madame Gatouni? Yes, the question was, what advice would you give to women or young girls who find it hard to assert themselves professionally in a field that is still heavily dominated by men?
Très bien, je m'excuse, j'avais pas bien.
I'm sorry, I had not heard the question. The advice I could give to these women who have a hard time getting inserted and find their place in a world tagged by prejudice, and it is the topic of this world to break such bias. So in a world that is really shaped by these biases and men, so I encourage them, those who are already in, I encourage them to go further, stronger, and higher, and push their ambitions higher, because they have to embrace their passion. They must hold on to something, to their dreams, to their ambitions, because sometimes we go against the flow, and these biases and prejudices make us go back and slow us down. But we must hold on to something to go beyond these limitations and reach our objectives. So that's the first thing. We must have an ambition, a vision, and a dream. It's the only way to find a path and a place, because in the digital world and a world full of prejudice, women are still looking for themselves. Nothing is given to them. They have to find things. They have to know how to look for things. The second thing I wanted to give them as a piece of advice is that skills bring you higher and further than words, than language. So women in such a field must not only be very good, they must be excellent, they must be brilliant. The biggest challenge is sometimes inside of you. You must be confident, but leave space for skills and brains, much more than words, because in the technological world, it's the know-how that matters more than the know-how to say. You must know how to do. And so if actions and skills, thank God in the scientific world and the technological world, it's something that you prove, it's concrete, it's 0 or it's 1. You must really go for excellency so that the intelligence and the skills of women can speak louder than their words, in a world that actually listens more to words than deeds. So women can prove themselves through their actions because they're very skilled in the scientific sector. There's no reason to say that it is a male world. Their skills must speak louder than that. They must know how to do instead of knowing how to say. They must persevere and pursue. Last thing, I encourage such a setting where platforms can give women a chance to meet other role models and learn from others' experiences, so that they can see that there's a lot of people around them in the same situation, a lot of other people who also succeeded already, and they too can succeed, and understand that in turn there must be themselves role models for the next generation. So there are those ahead of you and those behind you. So you must hold on to these things and draw inspiration from role models in these sectors so that you can always walk with your head high.
About really finding role models within your industry. I think that is an excellent point. Now, moving on to our last question before the Q&A segment, we know that education is foundational to any country's development. Yet issues such as learning poverty and access to quality education remain serious challenges that the region faces. Estelle Kusube is an economist at the Africa Gender Innovation Lab at the World Bank. You examine adolescent girls' empowerment, learning, and employment. Can you please tell us how we can break the biases and change sociocultural norms that discourage school enrollment for girls? Also, what is the role of men in helping to break these biases? Thank you, Estelle.
Thank you, Ruthie, for the question. I mean, this is actually a program that you are asking me to kind of like explain here, because this is, I mean, I think that other panelists like touch upon this. So it's actually a problem that has like so many, I mean, issues that are interrelated, that there is like a lot of things actually that can be done and that should be done. Actually, is not just one type of intervention that can help actually like reduce constraint that girls face actually to go to school. So first, I just wanted to mention that in addition to social norms and biases, there are other constraints actually that matter a lot for girls' education. So we know about like information constraint, for instance, poverty constraint, financial constraint, like lack of access to infrastructure and schools, that are all actually constraints that are just impeding girls' education, and that are also interrelated with like the role of social norms. And when we talk about social norm, basically there is a variety of norms actually that we have to take into account. For instance, norms around the value of education for girls. So for instance, like valuing more education for boys than for girls, but also norms around the division of labor in the household or even in the society as a whole, and other type of norms around the security of girls or like mobility that are also constraining actually the way girls can go to school and interact with others. So there is a variety of norms, there is a variety of type of constraints that are impeding actually girls' education. And when I talk about education, I talk about enrollment, achievement, but also learning. So we have to take all these constraints into account actually to be able to increase girls' access to education. Now, in terms of the intervention, I think that some of the panelists actually like touch upon some of the intervention that has been tested by colleagues of mine, but also other researchers at the World Bank and also in the academics, and that have been tested in sub-Saharan Africa, but also other parts of the world, and that have been shown actually to have an impact on either reducing the biases or allowing actually girls to have the competencies that will help them negotiate actually their access to school. For instance, like intervention like giving girls social-emotional skills and like skills like negotiation skills, or even giving girls information and their parents, obviously girls, information about the benefit to education, returns to education have been also shown actually to matter a lot. And information that other mentioned around edutainment that can help actually change the norms, and that can help actually shape different the communities and engage them in girls' education are also important. For instance, at the Gender Innovation Lab, we have been testing like intervention related to engaging men and boys actually in the communities to help with girls' education, but also achieve reduction in child marriage and also help with other type of outcome like delaying like pregnancies and those type of issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Estelle, for I think going into a bit more depth about some of the challenges that girls face with school enrollment, but also I think shedding some light on the research from the World Bank on how we can address some of these issues. We do have a bit of time, so before we go into our Q&A session, I'm going to pose one last question to all of our panelists, and I think we can answer it just looking at my screen, perhaps going from left to right. So we'll start with Kadita, we'll go to O'Neill, then we'll go to Estelle. I don't think I'm leaving anyone out. Then we'll go to Rosine, and then our final panelist. Am I forgetting anybody? Yes, Santa. I was very pleased, I think, while we were planning this event together with the World Bank Africa team and YTA, to see just how young men have been involved in the planning of this conversation, but also in the conversation itself on social media. Now, even though this is International Women's Month, we exist in a world where we live together with men. And so I'm interested to hear, in your view, what is the role of men, what is the role of allies in breaking the bias and making sure that we create a more inclusive world for women and young girls?
Well, for the fact, non, je vais parler en français. Donc en fait, pour ma part,
as to myself, what I think is that men do have a very significant place to help women to be more enterprising, if you will, to have more space in this world, because what you have to know, they are the leaders in most things. For companies, you usually in the salary gap also, and going to the bank and to ask for a loan, very often it's a man in the bank that is dealing with you. So I think they have to go break the bias most of the time, in education, in other milieus, because they are there. They're not necessarily always the leaders, but they have to help to break the bias that are against women. So in a family, a woman who has a company, who has a family again, doesn't have as much time as men who have a family, because she is supposed to go home, care for the family, the children, and not to work on her own company because she is too busy. And to help women there, whether it is a husband, a father, or other, through conversation, through pushing a conversation to go beyond the kitchen, staying home, for caring for the home. I think it is one of the most important things. If I talk about education, I try to explain things to a young person, to help the sister to go beyond the limits, not to impose a male vision because she is a woman, and this should be done also in school. So I think that is through talking, and that men should want to have more women, want to have more women leaders. Again, thanks to my father, that I understood that I could be autonomous, that I'm strong, that I have ambition. And my father talked to his brothers and his male companions to make sure that the nieces would be more enterprising, so that in African customs also we should push this issue so that men be able to understand that they have many things to do for that. Thank you.
I'm so glad that you wrapped up, because I was about to interrupt you, and that is like every moderator's worst fear. So I'm really glad that you kept it to time. But before we move on to you, O'Neill, I'm going to ask that all our panelists keep their contributions to 30 seconds to a minute. I don't like interrupting people, but if push comes to shove, I will. Thanks, O'Neill. It's over to you.
Thank you, Dimfo. And yeah, I'll definitely try to be brief. And I just want to echo what Kadiata said. I personally think that yes, there's definitely the words that matters, that it's important to encourage women in their endeavors, show them that they have a seat at the table, and also take actions in that sector. It's really important to support them in their action and be like active supporters. I'm just thinking when we talked about pay disparity, when Kadiata mentioned it, that there's a lot of ways that men could help at a job. For instance, when there's a contract negotiation with a woman, maybe tell him like what is his price range, his salary range, and so that gives her enough information to be able to properly negotiate a contract. And just make sure that we give women a voice. I've been in a lot of instances as an infrastructure lawyer where I would be the youngest woman in the room, the only Black woman in the room, and the only woman in the room. And I always appreciated when there was a man in the room asking for my opinion, asking me to also express myself. And I think that's one of the ways that men can support women in their endeavors.
Estelle, I think you're up next.
Okay, thank you. So I will try to keep it to 30 seconds. So I think there is definitively a role actually in engaging men actually to help achieve like different type of outcome for women. So it can be like education, it can be in the labor market, but also even in health actually. And there is some research about this. And there is more and more research coming and showing actually that engaging men do matter for women outcome, even in settings like post-conflict setting or setting of violence. So engaging men to try to change actually their attitude, their belief about different type of things, even like the division of labor that some mentioned, for instance, in the household, having men actually participate in the household so that women can free their time to actually like work or do more productive like activities matter a lot. And we see actually that through training and through education, it is actually possible to engage men and young boys actually from the beginning to actually achieve gender equality. And I hope there is more work that is done actually at the World Bank and elsewhere to continue this. Thank you.
Thank you, Estelle. Ms. Rosine and then Ms. Santa, 30 seconds each. It's over to you.
Merci l'implication.
Thank you. The participation of men is indispensable. Everything that is about women is about men. We talk about parents, fathers, and sons of these women. So anything that is about women is about men also. So beyond the provisions that might be decided upon, they have to be participants in decision-making, in implementation of policies for promotion of women, and concrete spaces. Let me give you an example. In a profession, when we ask how many women did you recruit in education, how many girls go to schools in sciences and other, more than men. So again, take into account the percentage of gender and women in the decision making. So this is for men also, this is their issue because they're implicated and they have the same issues as women and they have to be there.
Okay, I think I'm next. I'm just going to speak because everybody has said the what. I'm just going to say the how, because now we're in a generation where there's a lot of cancel culture going on, and there's a lot of impatience that is, being at the forefront of trying to get our male counterparts to understand exactly what it is when we mean gender equality or equity. So I would implore us as women to exercise patience and also try to explain and also educate rather than, coming in the form of an attack, because most of these men have grown up in settings that do not permit them to have certain types of understandings on the topics that we're bringing up. And so to have that cultural shift and to have the mind shift, it takes time. So I would implore us as women to make it more inclusive, not coming to them as an attack, but then helping them, educating them, helping them understand what it is, and exercise patience and be very slow to cancel culture. I think cancel culture takes away the element of conversation, and most of the time that happens in closing up and not wanting to listen to anything that we have to say. Also, we have to go back to base. Mothers, sisters, we implore you who are raising young kings, the education starts from now, not when they are grown. Thank you.
Indeed, the education starts now when they're still young, so that they understand how to be, young men who grow up in a world that has a generation of empowered women. So thank you so much, Santa, for that contribution, and to all our panelists, really. We are now going to go into our Q&A segment, and I'm very excited because this is where we allow our audience to also participate in the conversation, to also lend their voice by making some kind of contribution, whether through the chat function on social media. But we've also asked some members of the Youth Transforming Africa community to send through their contributions and ask a couple of questions. So first up, I'm going to invite Exosi Wonga from the Republic of Congo to ask her first question. The mic is yours.
Bonjour, moi c'est Exosi.
Good morning, Exosi Wonga. I am an engineer in civil engineering. I am engaged for the rights of young women and women with a group of my colleagues. We have a participative experience to share our challenges, to be heard and control the narrative, which united on the project young women in my country to improve the women's condition in my country. And I've seen that women are not represented in the sciences. That's why we have a platform today where we have profiles of young women in technology, in sciences, engineering, math, to show young girls that this is feasible and they could also be brought to sciences. My question is the following. In your career, how did you go beyond the bias and the roles that you were given to your gender?
Je peux peut-être commencer à répondre à la question et je laisserai ensuite les...
Maybe I can start giving an answer and the panelists can piggyback on it. Thank you for your question. I have a legal training and most of my studies, law studies, were done in France, and that's the first thing that enabled me to raise above preconceived ideas, particularly with African women, and I am aware that access to studies and long studies is quite a privilege. So my advice would be, and I would like to echo Mrs. Gatoni, it's to excel and do more than you are asked to get out of the mold. For me, I just needed a BA and a master's in law, to be a lawyer, but for 1 year I had 4 degrees concurrently to be sure that I would be competitive and beyond. You also need to be professional. Professionalism is a question of the quality of your work. If your work is of quality, it is important. It's also your presentation, the way you speak is important. This is also what enables you to break the bias. Also, perseverance and belief in oneself are 2 other important things. If you don't believe in yourself, it's not helpful. Nobody has been in a situation when they never had any obstacles. So it's true that you are told sometimes that you cannot do things, and it's important to believe in yourself. As far as I'm concerned, the only person who can tell you that you cannot do something, it's yourself. Even if you're afraid, even if you tell yourself you cannot do it, you still have to seize the opportunity. We'll learn by doing. That was my case, as was the case for many other people. And as my mother used to say, when you fall, you get up again. And you will face a lot of challenges, such is life, but you must go for it and not give up. And that's how you go forward.
That's so important. I really like what you say, O'Neill, about believing in yourself and showing up for yourself, even when you're scared. I had a power outage an hour ago, and trust me, showing up today, I was shaking. I'm worried about my connection. But I mean, that is just a menial example. I really appreciate what you're saying about showing up for yourself and showing up for others, even if you are afraid. We are now going to move on to our second question, which comes from Frances, and she's from the Gambia. So Frances, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Dimfo. My name is Francis Avi. I'm a development economist from the Gambia. And my question would be, in terms of breaking the bias, how much or how so does tokenism and affirmative action become counterproductive to actually breaking the bias? Because most times we see like affirmative action or tokenism in terms of giving certain positions just for women. But do you think that really breaks the bias, or that further reinforces the bias in the sense that it's like, oh, well, you have these positions reserved for you, so why then do you want more? So do you think affirmative action and tokenism reinforces the bias, or it actually reduces the bias? Thank you.
If I can answer that, I do think that on a larger, scale, it does really break the bias. And why do I say so? Because representation matters. And because representation matters, you need to be able to know that, okay, I did this because, for example, I'll take myself, for example. I have a background in journalism and media studies. I knew nothing in PR. I knew nothing in communications. But because I had a boss at the time who was into communications and PR, and I could see what she was able to do and how, her career is flourishing and how she's being successful, I was like, I want to be able to do this. And because I saw her and I saw what she was able to do, and I saw how she was able to work and how she was juggling simultaneously between a 9-to-5 and an actual business, I told myself, this is something I want to do. This is a field that I want to get into, because I was already interested at the beginning. And because she was in that field, because she represented what I wanted to be in the field that I wanted to be in, I was able to get up and do exactly what it is that she was doing, because I could see her. So in essence, employing women to take, certain positions doesn't really change from the fact that, people are going to have the ideas and the ideals that they're going to have. But just the fact that, that woman is there. You have a young girl, you have millions of girls who are saying, one day I would become like that person. One day I'm going to do that. One day I'm going to be there, and I have to work to be able to get there. That matters, and it matters to a larger extent than to a smaller extent.
Thank you so much for that, Svantha. We are going to move on quite swiftly in the interest of time to our final question. And that comes from Emma Kwaje, who is in South Sudan. Emma, you may go ahead.
Emma Kwaje. I am Block for Development 2021, South Sudan, and the founder of Banana Power Initiative. I'm a radio presenter and also a feminist. And what I'm doing, like, to break the bias is that, like, I've started an initiative which is the Banana Power Initiative, which is to help women and girls believe in the power that they have to fight against negative stereotypes that rises against them, and also to fight early and forced marriages, to fight the negative cultures and norms which, like, denigrate the women. And also we are working on to provide a space, a sisterhood space for girls and young women to voice their opinions and also to apply their unique talents and also to, like, show their capabilities to change their realities. And my question is, like, as women who you are already, like, having a career that you're doing and working hard, which steps are you taking, like, to reach back to out to the young girls who are out there, like, to help promote gender equality and also the empowerment of this kind of group of people, which is the young girls and all young women within your respective communities? Thank you.
Would anyone like to take that?
Yeah, so I would be happy actually. Yeah, no, I think this is really super, I mean, it is just awesome actually what you are doing. This is really important work actually, and giving girls like a safe space, like a space where they can just meet, have a network, express themselves. It's really important actually to build skills and connection. So myself actually, like through my research, basically, so all my research, or at least like a big part of it, is about adolescent girls, about child marriage, about access to education, about delaying early pregnancies. And through this work, what I'm trying to do at the World Bank is also like really try to design intervention that works actually for adolescent girls in sub-Saharan Africa, try to actually influence project, influence government like intervention, and do my part in increasing actually a voice for adolescent girls on the continent. And also through basically personal engagement for girls' education in my country, in Burkina Faso. So I try also to do my part. So both, I would say, like through my work and through personal engagement for girls' education. And I think what you are doing is really awesome.
J'aimerais également...
You may go ahead. I was just about to say that I see that Rosine's hand is up as well as Fanta. So you guys are going to have to share the 30 seconds. I don't know how you're going to wrap up in 15 seconds each, but you may try.
Très bien. J'aimerais
I'd like to piggyback on what my sister just said and focus on my general director function. Everything goes through government projects and private companies where there should be a space for young people. There should be competitions and initiatives so that they can raise to the task and show what they're able to do. Young women most often don't even have such an opportunity to show that they're capable, because sometimes the doors remain closed to them because there is a world that they don't have access to sometimes. So one of the things as a member of the National Council for the Youth is, and as such, my task is to give opportunities to young people. And once young people have such opportunities, they must grab it and show us that we did not make a mistake in giving them such a chance. And so I would also engage the young girls who are in the digital world. I started as in medical school, because in my world, being a doctor was the most noble profession, but it was not my passion. I had to change studies, and I was really not understood by my environment. And all along the academic course studies, there was no female professor in this field. So that inspired me, and I wanted to be a model for other people, because where I went through, there were no women. So for those of you who are in this network, you cannot give up and go back. Your strength comes from within. So I know it's the last minutes that we have left. I want to encourage everyone. There's no barrier, no obstacles to young women, only bias. And we must just face them and show the world that they have no reason to exist.
Okay, just to close off. So most definitely on my own part, I think what really, how I contribute to you know, young women out there is I basically just give a listening ear. And most of it has definitely been on social media. And so social media has been like a very great tool for me, because many of whom have approached me have been young women, because we're pioneering the PR landscape in Cameroon. And so those who come to my DMs to say, hey, I need this, I need, you know, info on this, I need advice on this, please, how can I make this work? I take out time every single day. I don't, you know, shun people. I ensure that I listen, I contribute as much as I can contribute. And I also just walk them through the ropes. Even if I don't know, I make sure I do my research and come back to them and give them answers. And today, I cannot say, I don't want to say I'm a mentor, but then today I'm counting 3 women who knew nothing about PR, but who are exceeding at their different jobs, and even, you know, doing amazing in their different jobs in PR and strategic communication. So as well, you know, if you're on social media and you're utilizing it and people come to your DM seeking for help on certain information on how to advance their career, especially something that you're doing, take out time to always talk to them, take out time to always listen, take out time to always help, because in that way you're building
I am going to interrupt you. Unfortunately, I did say I'd only do it if push comes to shove. And unfortunately, it has. But I think we've all gotten the gist of what you're saying, that as women in the positions that we're in, we have a responsibility, especially on social media, to make time for the women who do ask us questions and who do aspire to be in the spaces in which we occupy. We have a responsibility towards them to engage their questions and engage them in conversation. Thank you so much for those brilliant questions. I see that there are questions as well in the chat box. Those questions that we were not able to get to, we will answer them at a later stage. I think our team will be taking email addresses, or I think you can just watch out on the Youth Transforming Africa social media. We will make sure that we ask our panelists to speak to those. But as we conclude today's discussion, you know, after everything has been said and done, I'm really reminded of the words of African filmmaker Moki Makura, who mentioned during a Twitter space on International Women's Day that women have a role to break their own biases by standing out of their own way. Women need to put their names forward to lead, as well as to empower those around them to do the same. But before I let you go, I am going to give the floor to Marie Dafoe. She's the External Affairs Associate at the World Bank, and she's going to give us some quick closing remarks. It's over to you, Marie.
Merci beaucoup, Dinfo. Nous sommes maintenant arrivés à la fin de cette discussion. Merci infiniment.
We have now gotten to the end of this discussion. I would like to thank all for your experience, your models, and this is a model for all the people who are here. This is our last event for the International Day of Women, but it should be continued, because we will continue discussions and meetings, and we will fight against biases, and we'll talk about everything that we talked about today so that the world be more egalitarian. And these are the priorities of the World Bank. And especially, I would like to thank the moderator, Defo, and Transforming Africa. Thank you for your collaboration into this event. And thank you again to the participants for your interest for this morning or this afternoon, wherever you are in the world. See you soon and have a very good day.
Thank you so much for that, Marie. And thank you for this brilliant event. Thank you to the World Bank team, as well as Youth Transforming Africa, for really putting together this necessary and transformative discussion. Thank you to our audience. It's been an absolute pleasure to host you. I see some of you have been engaging with us on social media already. We really do appreciate it. To our fantastic panelists, thank you to each and every one of you for joining us and to your very meaningful contributions. But until next time, from myself and the team, goodbye and stay safe.
Thank you. Have a nice day.